Hi, y'all. Welcome to the Knit+Sip Podcast. I'm Kate.
I'm Sarah.
Thanks for joining us. So today we're going to do a Meet the Maker, and we're going to tell you a little bit about our backgrounds in fiber arts, and we want to hear from you guys too. So comment and tell us about when you started into fiber arts and what you like to do.
Yeah. Right.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure.
When did you start knitting and crocheting?
So I've started out crocheting first. I honestly can't remember the first time I crocheted. I think it might have been in high school.
Okay.
But I just would use YouTube video tutorials. I never used patterns or anything.
Oh my gosh, that's so brave.
Crochet to me is very like freestyle because you're just like picking up stitches and holes and like Anyway, it's very like short, and then knitting is like you have to do like
right.
True. So I started out crocheting probably like high school, and then the first time I remember like actually crocheting anything big was sophomore year of college. There was like this sunflower cardigan that Harry Styles had worn or something.
Yeah, I ever heard
that. Everyone was recreating it, so I made one.
Nice.
It ended up not fitting me right, but anyway, I don't know where that is anymore.
I was gonna say you should bring that in.
And it was definitely made out of like Lion Brand Pound of Love or whatever, like the acrylic from Joann's. And then I just like started crocheting off and on, and then when I was in, I guess it was my senior year of college, I started like crocheting more frequently, and I made my first like sweater, and I think that was like an acrylic wool blend, and it was big brown stripes and then little tan stripes.
Oh, nice.
And that was fully crocheted. And crocheting ribbing's pretty fun too.
Yes.
But
I have done that too, yes.
Yeah. And then I was living back here last summer, and I got really bored because I was living alone. None of my family lives here anymore. I was just sitting at my house. I was just going to my intern job and then coming home, and none of my friends really lived here anymore. So I was like, let me just learn how to knit, because I was very anti-knitting until I learned how to knit. Because I was like, why would I use two things to make clothes?
Who does that?
Yeah. So I was like, how do you even hold two needles at once? Anyway, so
I feel like you figured it out though.
I definitely did. I caught on very quickly. My first thing I ever knitted was a little, like, it was actually, I started out using just like knitting back and forth. I think I was just making stockinette in a little rectangle, and that's how I learned how to cast on, knit, purl, and then cast off. And then I made two of those, sewed them together, and then made a little purse. Don't use it, but it was a good starting point. And then the first thing I made after that was like a little baby vest thing for my mom's friend's daughter who was having a baby. And it was made out of cotton. It was green and pink. And I was it was fingering weight cotton, held double.
Oh, okay.
And I did not gauge swatch, and I figured out after the fact that I was twisting my stitches, because all of my, my knit stitches, because all of my work was like in a parallelogram, where it was just like this. It was straight here and here, but it was like this. And I was like, why is this happening? And yeah, anyway, it's because I was purling wrong too. Yeah. Because I was purling with the yarn underneath and pulling it through that way versus over the top. So, corrected that, and then got my first sweater's quantity of yarn for a knitted sweater from you.
Nice.
In the other shop.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yay.
It was Knitting for Old Merino, held double. It was what was it called? It was a raglan, and it's by something J'adore. I can't remember.
Oh gosh.
Anyway.
No, I don't either.
It was great. I honestly
figure that out.
Fit me fine, except for the collar was kind of thick, and I skipped the short row part because I was like, I'm not learning how to do short rows, because I was
great.
So it was like, cool.
So what did you do instead?
I just kept knitting.
Okay.
Well, because it was
cool.
It was a beginner pattern. It's made to be a beginner pattern. So there's a section where like it says if you want to do the German short rows, do it here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just decided to not do it, and then just did.
So they gave you the option.
Right.
It wasn't like you just skipped over it and said, I don't want those.
Yeah, I was just like, it was just not. It was too much for me at the time.
Yeah. Oh no, that's fair. I just thought you were just like, nah, we're gonna X that out of the pattern. And I was like, oh my gosh, that would have been funny. That would have been funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fine sweater. I don't wear it because it doesn't have short rows, and the collar, it's a double folded collar, but you cast on with the ribbing and then you fold it.
Yeah.
And I always find that that makes the neckline like really wide.
Okay. Yeah.
And I usually will cast on under the neck and then pick up stitches for the neckline later. Now.
Gotcha. Good tip.
But yeah, I mean, it fits fine. I might frog it and make something outside of it at some point. But the only like major issue with it is that there's like one like half of the round in the back where it's like rowed out like this. The stitch is like this long, and it's a DK sweater. So
I love that term, rowing out.
Yeah,
it makes me laugh every time.
But yeah, and then like basically just have gone insane after that. So.
Yeah, you have really gone all in.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what about you?
So I learned to knit one Christmas from my sister-in-law before we each have 2 kids apiece. And so this was a Christmas when our grandparents were still alive and we didn't have kids. And I can't really imagine this now with 2 children, but we were bored at Christmas and and stuck in the house. And she was knitting and I said, will you please teach me? And so she took me to a local yarn store and still remember that she told me, and I think it's really, if this is accessible to you, I think this is great advice. If it's not, then that's great too. But she had said, start with good yarn. So Madeline Tosh was the first yarn I ever knit with because she was like, no matter what it looks like, you're going to feel like you are committed to wearing it because you spent a little bit more money on the yarn. It's really nice to work with. It's going to last. You're going to like it a little bit more. And that always stuck with me that she said that because I thought that was, again, if that's available to you, I think that's a really great option. Yeah. And she's right. I still wear the very first projects I ever made. So she had me make a snood. Oh, okay. And and I still do wear it. Nice. So it's got some bits of maroon in it. And and I really like it. So like I have a maroon sweater and I'll wear it pretty much every time I wear that sweater.
Nice. That's fun.
Yeah. So cool. And then I had a pretty different start than you did. I feel like every bit that you're brave and take chances, I was very cautious and like followed all of the rules like to the book as far as just like I started out using patterns, but I started out knitting. So that's very different. I do feel like I hear a lot of people who crochet say I don't use patterns and everything. And I don't know if that's the way my brain works. So even with crochet, I will use a pattern most of the time. But I started out making, scarves, hats.
I made to make a scarf. And a hat, actually.
I tried to count the other day how many baby blankets I have made. I have probably made a dozen or more baby blankets since I started knitting.
I've made a full queen size crochet blanket.
Okay.
And I made a baby blanket, but that's about it.
I've made a full queen size knit blanket as a wedding gift. And then they lost the bag on our way over to England. It was a gift. And I was like, I mean this in the nicest way possible, but I'm not leaving the airport without this bag. So I was like, I will stay here until you find the bag. I was like, you could have lost my dress for the wedding. It wouldn't have mattered, but you lost the bag with the knitted blanket in it. I shouldn't have carried that on.
Oh, man.
So if you're going overseas with a really important gift that you have hand knit, carry it on.
Oh, yeah.
It was
huge.
It would be very hard to carry on a queen size throw. Like I'm not actually sure you could do that. So anyway, just think about that the next time you fly overseas with a hand knit queen size throw. But so I did all of the really, really safe things, like played it really safe. I knit for 6 years before I ever made a garment. And it was a Pearl Soho knit along, the first sweater I ever made. I made it with linen yarn, which I later found out I was allergic to because the whole time I was knitting it, I was broken out.
Oh my gosh.
Up to my shoulders, and found out later I was allergic to flax, which is a component in linen. So I kept thinking it was like stress or something else. Like my kids had been sick. I thought maybe I was sick. No, it was the linen yarn. So can't wear that sweater, but it was a great experience. And I think having the knit along was what gave me the confidence to do it, was that I didn't feel like I just wasn't brave enough to take it on alone. So for anyone out there who's thinking about attempting your first garment, definitely, either join the knit along, find a local yarn shop, find somebody who can do it with you. We will be glad to encourage you. because it is not as nearly as scary as I thought it was. Again, I knit for 6 years before making a garment. So one thing I love about what I do is that I find beginner patterns for people, and I will have, anyone who comes here regularly who has like just started to knit or crochet, I will always have them make a garment within their first like year of knitting or crocheting, sometimes within the first few months, depending on their comfort level, because I think that that's what really gets you hooked. And that's probably why you got hooked like so fast. And I was hooked. I really enjoyed it. And I did a lot of projects, but when you can only make apparently a dozen or so blankets before you feel like you have to do something else, and all the hats and the scarves and everything. So but yes, I mean, those are great ways to start, but then I think it's great to be able to know that there are beginner garment patterns that are out there and accessible to you. And in fact, I'm wearing one. So this is actually the road trip sweater. This is a We Are Knitters kit by North Knits, who also started Our Maker Life. So if you follow them online, great designers, and works a lot with We Are Knitters.
Cool.
So, yep. So this is a great one. It is seamed, which I think people think is scarier than what it is. So I think we should, maybe when you do steeking, I can talk a little bit about seaming or some of the other things that are scary to people. So this is seamed, but I love this. I actually wore this to Rhinebeck last year. Nice. So yes, I just liked the colors. Apparently they're not my colors though, so that's too bad.
Oh well.
It is what it is. Yeah. So, and then I started crocheting maybe a year or so before I started the store, because I wanted to make sure that I could help anybody who crocheted, who, when I kind of knew that I was going to be opening a store, I wanted to know that I could help, crocheters and knitters and anyone who came in. So I do both, and I definitely enjoy both. Definitely been knitting longer and a little bit more comfortable with knitting because I've been doing it so much longer, but I definitely enjoy both. So yeah. So what interested you initially in fiber arts?
I don't even know. I think I'm just like, I've always been a very like crafty person. Okay. So I think it was just like another step to the being crafty, because I started out sewing when I was in middle school. Because my mom used to always sew our Halloween costumes and stuff.
Oh, cool.
So she let me start using her sewing machine, and then I sewed a lot when I was younger. I mostly just took like clothes I already had and like made clothes from that. Like I would use that as like a pattern. And I actually made both my prom dresses. I don't think I've ever told you that, but yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
So
cool.
I don't think I have pictures. I don't think I won't share pictures. But I looked really weird. I looked very different, but also the same. Anyway, so I just I've always enjoyed like making my own clothes, whether it's knitting, crocheting, or sewing. Definitely more into the knitting now, but I think just like being able to make my own clothes and not have to like go into a store to buy clothes, because I hate trying on clothes, and nothing like, I feel like you pick up something and you're like, oh, that's totally gonna look good, and then it looks terrible because it doesn't fit you right.
Right.
And so I enjoy being able to be so specific about what I'm making by choosing the pattern, the color, the yarn, like everything about it. I can choose. So I enjoy the flexibility.
So I had to think about this one. I think it went back. So I did none of that when I was little. I really didn't. I remember my mom making a Halloween costume for me, and she sewed her finger I don't know, onto the needle, and had to go to the emergency room.
Oh my gosh, that's like my worst fear.
So I did not do that, and was kind of actually scared of sewing machines for a long time after that. I was slightly traumatized. But I don't know if I've ever made up with sewing machines, actually. I mean, I really don't use them. But anyway, I mean, I'd love to learn, but it's not been something I've pursued. I do think that when I was little, I remember getting like a knitting doll, or it was really what it was a knitting mushroom, one of those things with 4 prongs. And then you kind of just make you make an I-cord.
Right.
And that was one of my favorite Christmas gifts, and I used to do that all the time, and I made all of my Beanie Baby scarves.
I used to do that with like a bigger one and made hats out of it.
Oh,
but I never considered that knitting.
No, I don't either. But I really think that I always remember at least enjoying that, but I have none of the background that you do. So I honestly think a lot of it came down to just watching my sister-in-law do it, and she's incredibly talented. She's doing an Antarctica hat right now for a Secret Santa giveaway. Nice. I'm like, wow. She never ceases. Her brilliance never ceases. She amazes me. So, and if she ever listens to this, she's actually my cousin's wife. It's just easier to say sister-in-law because it sounds strange to say my cousin's wife all the time. Cousin-in-law. Yeah, I guess she is technically. So, but sister-in-law in all the ways that matter. So anyway, but I think really just seeing her and the things that she made, I was like, wow, I really think I want to try this. And I'm so overwhelmed by how much I love it. I mean, I didn't catch on as fast as you did by any stretch of the imagination, but I think I loved it probably as much as you did from the beginning. So.
Yeah.
So we talked about a little bit about who taught us to learn. So, I mean, I will say that my experience was that I was grateful to have somebody sitting there literally holding my hand to learn the very basics, like the cast on, the knit stitch, the purl stitch, and then, but we don't live close. So, I mean, after that, it was a whole lot of YouTube. And I do feel like I could pick it up pretty easily on YouTube. I think I have found that there is information out there that is either somewhat wrong or not the way I learn. And so I think with YouTube, you have to be careful with that sometimes as far as, is this speaking to me in a way I understand it? Does this person learn the same way I do? Are they even correct?
Yeah.
But really otherwise, I mean, so once I got the basics down, I could take it and learn. Right. But I do think that it was impactful to me to realize that, at least for me and other people who might be like very hands-on learners, that it can help to have somebody actually sitting there holding your hand. And so I teach all the time and knitting. I don't teach anything else. I would be a terrible teacher, but I teach crochet and knitting all the time. And I definitely feel, have felt an experience that, it helps to have somebody right there with you. But like I said, YouTube has been a great resource. I mean, it isn't like I, for the most part, would text her and be like, how do you do this or anything, like that. It was just the very beginnings, the cast on, the knit, the purl, maybe the bind off that, once I knew that, I felt pretty equipped to move forward on my own. So.
Yeah. I learned on YouTube solely. I knew 0 people that knit literally at all until I came to your store. So
that's awesome.
Like literally no one. So I was just
now
learning
you can't
through
get rid
YouTube.
of us.
I know. I was just learning through YouTube, and I'm not a hands-on learner. I like seeing people do things. I don't like people doing things for me because I'm very stubborn. So I also enjoy being able to like rewind and watch the same thing over and over and over, like to get it. If I'm like doing it wrong, I'm like, how are they doing it? So
and see, I'm better at having someone at the beginning, having someone to ask questions to, because like you can ask YouTube a question, but what if you don't even know what you're asking it? Like, what if you don't know what it's called?
Right. Yeah.
So just having someone that I can actually interact with and have a conversation with, I learn a little bit better that way. So, and I will say, for anyone who is learning, there's a couple of either YouTube channels or sites that I've found that speak to me the way I learn, that I have found to have pretty good information. So I would say anytime that you're going through, a bigger yarn brand, like a Purl Soho, a We Are Knitters, those usually always have pretty good tutorials. I think Purl Soho is the one I typically direct people to. They have tutorials right on their website or on YouTube. But like I said, We Are Knitters has some good ones. So, stick to, I love, of course, anything Andrea Mowry does, I love. So I've learned so many things off of her videos. I think those are a few good ones, but I would definitely just caution you to not, maybe don't click on the one that you don't know or something, or if you find a channel that you feel like speaks to you, and let us know that too, so we can share that with people.
I'll put one in the description, but it's like, I forget what the actual channel name is, but it's like this, it's like pink and then
Very
this
Pink Knits?
I think so. She has like kind of short hair.
She's pretty good.
But she, like, if I looked up something like how to do something and she was up there, I'd probably click on that one.
Right.
Because I've watched her videos before and I understood what she was talking about. I do not enjoy when tutorial videos have a bunch of talking at the beginning.
Right.
So I'm always like skipping to the start of the thing.
And that's another thing I like about the ones with the companies is usually they're just pretty like straight to the point. But I think I've heard Very Pink Knits and Knit Pearl Hunter. I've heard are two other pretty good ones. But again, I kind of just end up trending toward the ones that are through the companies because sometimes they don't talk at all. They just show you. Yeah, and then I'm like, oh, I like this one. Yeah. So this is great. Yeah. But all right. So tell me about 3 things that you wish you knew starting out that you know now.
How to purl correctly. Probably gauge. Gauge is like kind of the importance of needle size and yarn weight and them together because agreed. If someone gives you gauge, you're like, oh, whatever, and then you like, especially as a beginner, like that flew over my head. I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna choose a yarn that has a similar meterage and then just use it and like, because like my first sweater I did that and it worked because I even went as far to even hold the fingering like with itself and do it that way, which was crazy. I don't know why I did that, but I mean it worked, and that's what that's what I was calling for because it was a DK sweater. But probably the importance of gauge, purling correctly. I started out continental, which was nice because that's how I held my yarn when I was crocheting. So that's how I started out continental.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I can't think of another one. I'll just say those 2.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Just
what about you?
3 is just a good number. Yeah. So I think that I wish I like what you said about the yarn weights and patterns. So I picked up reading patterns pretty quickly. That didn't really go too far over my head, but I definitely found myself choosing yarns I liked over yarns that were the actual weight. And so I think that, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but there's a book out there that I think is called something like Yarnology, maybe something like that. But it talks a lot about just different yarn weights, different fibers and everything. And reading that book cover to cover, which I did fairly early on, definitely changed a lot of how I did things. So I really think understanding fibers, understanding yarn weights, and how that can all go together into what you're doing. And part of it is I didn't need to learn that for a long time because I was mainly making blankets. Though the hats got a little weird sometimes. I definitely made one for my nephew that was giant. So when he was a newborn. But yeah, so I think that would be a really big one. I think that, and this is really hard and this was not accessible to me early on in my knitting, but I think having a community is really nice. So if there's a way that you can be a part of an online community. Also, when I started, I don't even think really online communities were necessarily a thing. So I think that anytime that you can jump into and knit along, even if it's virtual, if you have, a local yarn store that you like, you can go to, finding some kind of a group to ask questions to, because I think just being able to talk to someone and, it keeps you motivated on projects. You might have questions or you might see something, someone else is doing and it's great inspiration. So I definitely think that, yarn weights, having a community, all really good things. And I think, I don't know, I'm kind of with you. I'm not really sure if I'm coming up with another thing I would have really wanted to know. Maybe just how to filter through YouTube videos a little bit better to find the correct information. Maybe I will say the other thing is having a book that's like, because again, going back to the point of you don't know what you're asking YouTube, sometimes you don't even know what it's called. So having a book like the Vogue Knitting Stitch Dictionary or there's like a Vogue Knitting, intro,
like abbreviation dictionary thing.
So like knowing about the Craft Yarn Council website and abbreviations, or having some kind of a book or a guideline, something like that, I think would have helped just probably get me to the point where I would have made a sweater before 6 years into my knitting career.
I will say I think what helped me a lot is that I've always like been into watching YouTube, just like general YouTube. So I used to watch a lot of makeup videos, even though I don't wear any makeup, but it's just like fun for me to see what people are doing. But so I've always been on YouTube. It's like my most used app on my phone. But when I first started knitting, I just like somehow happened upon knitting podcasts. And I think that definitely helped me like be aware of what was out there, and like that's how I figured out what Ravelry was, because the first pattern I bought was off of Etsy.
Okay.
And I think the first one or two patterns I bought off of Etsy. And Etsy's it's like it's a good resource if you don't like Ravelry, like, because the database is kind of weird sometimes. But yeah, knowing what Ravelry was, like what patterns people were knitting, like the most beginner designers like Petit Knit. My favorite things nowhere is like I feel like it's borderline not beginner, but Petit Knit for sure. My second pattern was from her. So yeah, I think knitting podcasts definitely just like made me aware of like what was going on and like what I could use and like general knitting inspiration.
Nice.
So yeah.
So what advice do you have for people starting out?
Get a good understanding of what yarn weights mean and what the scale is of yarn weights, like which is the thinnest and what's not the thinnest.
And so Craft Yarn Council is a great place to go for that. Again, I'm almost certain there's a book called Yarnology that you could even just get off Amazon, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think, just like yarn weights and gauge is like really, really important. Knowing what fibers you enjoy using and what's not irritating your skin.
Breaking out in hives.
Yeah, I think merino is a really good place to start because it's super soft even if it's not superwash. Yeah, merino is definitely a good place to start if you're looking to knit with wool or crochet. But
yeah. So I think when I have people who come into the store, a lot of their frustrations, so I'm going back to thinking about me and then, thinking about all of the people I come across at the store, and, I guess persevere is my biggest piece of advice. And so whether you're persevering because you found a local yarn store and you can go ask some questions, or you have a group you can ask some questions to, or you're really good at finding good answers on YouTube and actually being able to execute off of it if you're stuck. So I think just persevere is a really good piece of advice. And I think that if you don't be afraid to rip it out too. So like if I'm not suggesting, I mean, we all know I am definitely tending, now that I know how to, I tend to fix things. And so maybe that's another piece of advice is, I do oops classes here at the store. So, find someone who can teach you, YouTube, how to fix things. So if you get stuck, know how to get unstuck, quite literally. So whether that means, you rip your project out and start over, or, even start a different project. I mean, if there's a project you've started and you can't get through it, just like what you were saying about your first sweater, I am not going to rip my first sweater out because I don't want to touch that yarn again. But it sits here as a sample in the store. But you might rip your first sweater out, you said, frog it and do something else with it. So, don't be afraid to do that. Don't feel like you've failed. And, find a project that is the right level for you, that inspires you, that you want to keep going on. So again, knowing about, how to use different pattern sites and find, the right like kind of level for you. Ravelry is pretty good at showing that. I always start getting a little bit nervous when people walk in and they're like, I found this pattern on Pinterest. I'm like, uh-oh. Because sometimes they're not peer reviewed and just like things like that, or test knit. That's my corporate background coming out of like peer review it, test knit. And so anyway, the other piece of advice I would say is learn how to do things the right way. Like, don't necessarily think that you can't learn the long tail cast on and try to cast something on with a backwards loop method. I get so frustrated when people come into the store and they're like, oh, this person taught me how to knit, but they taught me the easiest cast on, and then their work is like unraveling because and I'm like, oh no. So, I have taught, and again, it can be challenging. So I'm not saying this to say that like, oh, everybody gets it, because no, it takes time. But I mean, I have taught kids as young as 7 to do a long tail cast on. Like, learn how to do the skills the right way so that you don't get so stuck, or you don't get frustrated, or your work doesn't fall apart. if you notice a dropped stitch in something, look up how to fix it, but don't panic. So that's another, persevere, don't panic, learn the right way to do things are all good pieces of advice for people starting out.
Yeah, I would agree.
And find someone you can ask questions to.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So what elements of the craft have kind of made it more of a hobby to you? So like, I feel like this is a lifestyle for you. So what is it about the craft? What is it about fiber arts that's, launched it into a lifestyle rather than a hobby?
I think it's because I can do it while doing other things, and it's like I don't have to it's like a productive hobby. Like if
productive sitting.
Yeah. Like I am sitting down, but I'm also making clothes, so therefore it is productive. But like I can have conversations with people while doing it. Like if I'm literally just in like hanging out with my family and like in the living room and we're just like either watching TV or like playing a board game, it's not my turn. Like I can just put a few stitches in here and there. Yeah. So that's probably why I really enjoy it, and it's just very meditative. Like I just love. I don't know. It's something about it.
There's definitely something about it.
Yeah. What about you?
So I think two different answers. Starting out, I had a big transition in my life when my daughter was a year old, and we had a childcare situation, and I ended up staying home with her. And I went from a corporate job where I was working with, global multinational companies to being at home with a nonverbal 1-year-old. And I'm so incredibly grateful for that time. I mean, and I know that that's not available to everyone. And so my gratitude, I couldn't have any more gratitude for being able to be home with my kids, but it was a really major transition that happened really fast and was not planned. And she needed me and I needed to be there, and I could, and that was amazing. But it was definitely something where, a big transition in my life. And I think knitting was something where I could, I would make things and, I see my progress, and I felt like, hey, this is something I'm doing for me. And I saw that progress, and I could do it while I was with her, and it didn't take away from her, and I enjoyed that time with her. But I was also doing a little bit of something for myself, and it kind of helped me weather that transition. And I loved that time, and I'm so glad I could do that. But I do think it helped to have that stabilizing force of like knitting, and maybe something where like I had this piece of myself in it. So because I'd never planned to be a stay-at-home mom, and it was really different from having a 60+ hour a week corporate job. So and then I think the other piece of it is that I think we've talked a little bit about this, so I won't go very far into detail on this, but I love the design element of it, that like I get to pick the colors and things like that. So that's been a big part of it too, is feeling like there's a fashion element to it for me that I really like.
I do enjoy that a lot as well. I mean, I talked about it earlier, but I never like considered myself a fashion person, but I guess this technically makes me a fashion person by default. So yeah. I really
Sorry
enjoy
you're
it.
here.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
And I like what it does for the environment too. And I'll try to tend to use like natural fibers, because I feel like when it inevitably, sadly, is going to end up someday in a landfill, I don't feel so bad about it. I know I had bought a pair of pants to go to Rhinebeck that went with a sweater, and I've only worn them twice, and like they're ripped and all this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So, and I'm gonna have to throw them away, and they're probably not made of anything that's like okay.
Right.
So I'm, I really like that aspect of it too, that I'm making things that aren't going to hurt anything several years from now.
Yeah.
When they're no longer with me. So yes.
Sure.
So what are a couple of goals for continuing education? So anyone out there who's looking for some goals of their own as far as continuing education with fiber arts, what are yours?
What are my goals for continuing education?
Yes.
Definitely like get more into the nitty-gritty for spinning. It's not really like about knitting. It is, but like not really. But I've very gently dipped my toes into spinning, and I feel like a lot of the stuff I'm doing has certain names to it, but I'm not sure what it is. So like actually doing like research and like figuring out certain techniques and when they're used, and how like woolen prep fiber is supposed to be woolen spun, but like what's like what am I doing in wool and spun versus short forward, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So just like fiber art expanding. So I feel like now that I'm spinning, I feel like the next step has to be weaving.
Oh,
but I don't. Yeah,
That's
but
so
I feel like
cool.
weaving is
Okay.
just like a whole new thing.
Right.
It's like anyway, it's just like it's like kind of a grid like knitting is, but it's more like you have to pre-plan your woofs and then you're So it's a whole thing. But I think spinning, definitely gonna go deeper into that. I also unrelated but kind of related. I finished my brown fiber spin from Rhinebeck.
Oh, nice. That's
and
awesome.
I think it's dry now, so I can
Very
start
cool.
swatching and figure out what I want to make with it. So,
I love it.
Yeah, love spinning. So, yeah.
So one of my goals, and again, I probably mentioned this before, so I'm not going to go really far into it, but for 2025, I want to take some sweaters that were fast fashion of mine and recreate them. So that is definitely something that I want to do, very soon within the next year is take a handful of sweaters and recreate them. Some are falling apart, some are not great fibers, and I want to do that. I think a long term, this is very long term, like when my children are a whole lot older than they are right now, because reading about it, I think this would be really hard for me to do and manage with, a family and a business and stuff. But I would love someday to knit something that ends up in the movies, like to somehow figure out how to like apply. I've been reading up on it. It sounds really intense, but really cool.
Like in Only Murders in the Building.
Yeah,
because she's supposed to like she knits. Or
yes,
Mabel,
she does.
She knits.
Selena Gomez, she knits. Yes.
Yeah, but like all of the sweaters that she wears, like I'm sure
somebody made.
Someone's made probably most of them because I saw Study Knits. She's a podcaster and she's a medical student, but she made a video about like all of the sweaters that Mabel wears in the first season and then found patterns that were like similar to them.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so fun. But yeah.
So I think my background with like when people, because a lot of times people bring patterns in here and say like, I want to recreate this, and I find something. And so they talked about in some of the research I was doing how you have to do that, and you have to, it's like part of a pattern and part of your design and part of this, and you have to take everything and you have to have a warehouse of yarn basically, which I kind of, not a warehouse yet, maybe someday, but I have access to yarn. And so, but it sounds very, very time consuming and very deadline oriented. And I just don't think my life is there right now, but I would really love to do
some
that.
Really intense sample knitting.
Yes, really intense sample knitting. And I was surprised in the research I did how many sweaters that are worn in shows and movies are actually handmade.
Really?
There were some pictures of ones that I was like, wow. I mean, down to like skirts and dresses and things like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was hand done.
Yeah.
That's unreal. So long-term goal.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So what are you making, or what have you made? Yeah. Show us what you're working on.
I'll talk about what I'm wearing first, because you already talked about yours. So this is actually what I was talking about in the last podcast that I was watching for, and it's Aran weight, but it says it's sport weight.
I forgot about that. Yes.
This is Why Not Fiber Shetlandia Sport asterisk, but it is called the Zakuri cardigan. I forget the designer, but I finished this in a week because it was the only thing I was working on.
I love it.
But this yarn,
I actually,
so if you look at my sleeve, it was too short. I had to frog back and knit an inch, and then I redid it. And I haven't reblocked this sleeve.
Oh, okay.
Or this part of the sleeve. I'm not gonna redo the whole thing, but so the color's called Budding Maple, and it is pretty itchy. I've been wearing it with a turtleneck. I'm like fine right now. It's not like I'm kind of sweating too, and I'm still like fine, but it's definitely prickly. It's not like itchy. And surprisingly, I'm like not that sensitive to wool. So
yeah, I'm not either.
But I love the fit of this. It's a raglan. I did.
That's really cute.
I did stop the raglan really early. I just kept trying it on and then stopped it when I felt like it was fine. And then I changed the sleeve decreases completely. I just did every 5 rounds I decreased. Yeah, and then actually I think the sleeves are supposed to be a 3x1 or 2x2 because I didn't read the pattern. But everything else is a 3x1 with the neck and the bottom. And these buttonholes are actually like afterthought buttonholes.
Oh, are they?
Yeah,
really?
except for this top one.
That's cool.
Everyone else is where you just like stick your finger in it, and then you go 3 rows down and then whip stitch around the hole.
Cool.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
It's the first time I've done that, and I think you can you could do it in a rib, I think, but I think doing it because it's stockinette.
Yep.
But there's like 3 rows of stockinette.
Nice.
So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Obviously I finished it in 6 days. So I had to go down a needle size, so I knit on 4mm needles. So yeah. And it's pretty cropped too, but like this is like I have a pretty short torso, so this is like normal cardigan length for me. And then this is new since last time I was here too. This is the Saglin. I forget who it's by.
Nice.
But I'm using Newton, unspun yarn, and Knitting for Olive all together.
I love the color. How it marls.
This is from my mother for Christmas. Because her and my dad and my aunt and uncle are going to Norway without me. And so my aunt and uncle are paying me to make them sweaters. So I was like, I have to make my mom a sweater.
Oh, you do.
My dad's not a big sweater guy, so I'm just gonna make them ones. But this is for when she goes to Norway. I don't know what this color is, but I love Newton so much. And then this is just to keep it from breaking because it is for my mom, and I don't want it to like fall apart and her like freak out that it's like falling apart. So, yeah. And then so the Saglin, it's like a saddle shoulder raglan. So it's a contiguous sleeve, but the contiguous part of the shoulder is a little bit thicker than normal. So yeah. So if you like.
I see it.
This is really just cool. Increases every row, and then you do increases for the sleeve, and then you do raglan until you split for the body.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, I really enjoy it. The color combo is like not anything I would have normally chose, but I think it looks good. Like from far away, it looks like it's like gold.
It does.
But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that is most of my projects have deadlines, so they're all Christmas things. But so that's for my mom, and then this is from my aunt, the one that she's paying me to make her.
Nice. Oh, I love it.
And it's very chunky, so it's nice. So this is a circular yoke pattern from this book, Sandesgarn Norwegian Icons 75. And the pattern is called Tilda Lady Sweater. That's the one on the front, but she wanted a brown one, so I did like a lighter brown and a darker brown instead of red.
Nice.
But yeah, it's
like it.
It's knit in their Fritsgarn, which is like a bulky weight.
Got it.
And it's knit on 5.5mm needles.
All right.
So, and this is the yarn.
Nice.
This is the yarn that they use to make their double felted slippers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that.
It's definitely. It's not super rustic. Like it's definitely it's like softer than I would have thought. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I got through the yoke in like a day and a half.
That's great.
And I've just been beautiful. Yeah, it's really quick because it's on bulky weight and 5.5mm needles. So
that is quick.
Yeah. And then this is my last active whip, which I started 2 days ago. So these are the songbird mittens.
Yeah. Someone bought those the other day. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I think they're going to be too big. So they're for my sister-in-law.
Okay.
My brother's wife. I think they might be too big, so I might throw them in the dryer.
Is that how you define it?
What?
Sister-in-law? I'm just kidding. I'm making fun of myself. Sorry.
But I worked on these during lunch, and I'm like halfway through the thumb gusset right now.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But this is the front. This is the back. You can't really tell the difference yet. But I'm like 7 rows into the body part or the hand part of the colorwork.
I like the top where it comes to a point.
The point,
yes, it's so pretty.
Yeah, most Norwegian style or colorwork mittens are like that too, which is fun.
Interesting.
So the yarn I'm using, the cream is Sandesgarn Sunday and Knitting for Olive Mohair. This is a cream color, and I think this is putty. And then I'm using my scraps from my Som cardigan. This is LBA Kumo and Felix in the color Hegelia, I think. So I had like a lot left over, so I was like, might as well.
They work beautifully together.
Oh yeah. So this is a fingering loop pattern on 2.7mm needles, and I'm using this together with 2.5, and I still think my gauge is a little big. So I'm going to toss them in the dryer for like 5 minutes. probably. I'm going to do one. I'm going to finish one.
No, it'll be
throw
fine.
it in the dryer for like a bit. Because, I mean, it's not like I tried it on.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah, no. I tried it on, like, I mean, it's not like super, it's definitely like big, but I think I would put an elastic through this blue part anyway. So
good tip. I like it.
Yeah. They're for my brother's wife. So yeah. And then my last active whip are some socks.
Awesome.
These are the Hibernal socks by Summerly Knits, maybe? I think. These are the fingering weight version. But it's a faux cable, and I did the heel. I'm on the foot.
Oh.
I think I'm still going through the gusset decreases. But it's really cute. I think I'm going to give these to my mom for Christmas.
Oh, very pretty.
Yeah. Nice. And then this is the Ching fiber.
Yep, Ching fiber. I like it.
But this is like it's like, it looks white, but it's a very, very, very light
I think it's called like rhino.
Gray. Yeah. Like it's a very light gray, but it has a grain tinge to it, which would make sense if it's called rhino. So.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have whip-wise.
Well, in stark contrast to your beautiful, intricate, ornate mittens, I am making my children mittens that are going to get destroyed at the playground. So I am definitely not making beautiful Norwegian colorwork mittens. These are the mittens I have made for them for pretty much ever. And they're called pop top mittens. And so what you will end up doing is picking up into the purl row, and you'll do a top that comes over, and then they get to pick their buttons out, and it sews, you just sew the button on, and they can
convertible
have either,
mitts.
they're convertible mittens. So they think that's cute. So yes, and this is Madeline Tosh, Aran weight. Technically, this is a worsted weight pattern, so I've gone down a couple of needle sizes, and they've tried them on, and they're really good. So it's Madeline Tosh Aran weight farm twist triple twist in emotional support water bottle and bourbon rye or rye bourbon. One of those colors that sounds like Kentucky. So that's what that is. And then I have my ranunculus too.
You really made progress on that.
I have really made progress on this. So this is my pride and joy. So this is I'm calling it, for anyone who follows IU football, the Sig 10 sweater. So that's a big, just trending term right now. So Coach Signetti is our football coach. We're in the Big 10, Sig 10. I don't know. So anyway, I'm calling it my Sig 10 sweater. And this is the one where I am doing the corrugated ribbing instead of the regular ribbing. So I have finished the front and the back, and I am about, 13 rows from being done with the first sleeve. It's a lot of ribbing. I may be closer to 18 rows before I'm done with this. I'm not sure. I have to try it on again, but I thought this was really cool. We talked in our last podcast about altering patterns, and it's really interesting, how this works out. So I took this and manipulated it to a 1x1. So I took a 2x2 rib and manipulated it to 1x1 so that I could do the Italian bind off because I wanted it to be stretchy. And I just think the pattern I created is really pretty with the underneath. You won't see it, but I think in the corrugated ribbing with manipulating it, it ended up being really pretty. I will say, if you choose to do this, so this is the Yoon sweater. And if you choose to do the corrugated ribbing, we talked in our podcast and then in my Ravelry bundle on Ravelry, I've made some initial notes, and I'll continue to update notes. But on the front of the sweater, I decreased the 2 stitches that they tell you to decrease before you start the ribbing. And if you're doing corrugated ribbing, would not do that. So on the back, I did not do that decrease because it kind of folds in anyway. So I like the way it looks without having done the decrease, since it takes away a little bit of the width anyway. I also have my ranunculus, which I don't even have over here, so I won't worry about showing you that. But then we know what the ranunculus looks like from the last podcast. I am on so I did a turtleneck, so I'll show that next time. And it's really cute. I did 40 additional rows of ribbing so that it could be a turtleneck. I finished that. I finished the body, and I'm just picking up for the sleeves right now. So then I decided that I was a little bit sad about the lack of Wicked inspired patterns on Ravelry. I really tried to look and I didn't find a whole lot, I decided I had to do something for Wicked. And so I did that brioche hat for my daughter. That's, 2-color brioche. I probably could have just done that again, but I decided I like to try other patterns. So I'm doing one called the Fisherman's, but it's Phis. Yeah, Fisherman's. That spelled that way. Fisherman's rib hat. And it's actually a 2-color, it isn't right now, but it will be a 2-color fisherman's rib hat. So I'm sure I won't get it done, by maybe opening this Friday. I'm not even going this Friday. My daughter is, but in theory, I will be excited to see. So the interesting part about this one, and I've done fisherman's rib quite a bit, but I've never done where you alternate knit one below, purl one below, because I guess I've never really done it maybe in the round, I suppose. But yeah, so I'm going to be excited to see how this turns out. It's a really nice pattern. So we'll put it in our Ravelry bundle.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for tuning in, y'all.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.